Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte for innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning. Turn to Deloitte. Kevin Hedderwick, Chief Executive of Famous Brands, is in our Upper Echelon today. And it's such an interesting story, yours, Kevin. Hailing from East London, way back, certainly weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth.
No, not at all, Alec. I mean, I come from a small seaside resort, which was a seaside resort those days, and I'm the product of two civil servants.
What brought you, or what got you motivated to do the kind of entrepreneurial stuff that you've done over the past 30 or so years?
I think I've been pretty fortunate to have worked in some wonderful organizations that's prepared me for the job that I do now. I often talk to people and say that, I think what I do now I've been practicing for all my life. I've been very blessed to have worked in two magnificent organizations, which one was Distel, which is part of the Rembrandt organization, and I was there in the early days. And then, of course, I always talk about SA Breweries being my alma mater, and I suppose that was probably still is today, the finest business school you can go to in South Africa.
Certainly was in the 80s when you were there.
No, it was. I mean, it was certainly, even though we used to tease ourselves about SAB was never a monopoly, it was a temporary sole supplier, which was a big difference. That business certainly was, there was a spirit of continuous improvement that was woven into the very fabric of that business all the time.
You probably read Tony Manning's book called World Class, where he said at the time of democracy in South Africa, there was only one world-class company in South Africa, and that was SAB. So it's not surprising, I guess, in your eyes to see how well it's done internationally.
No, it's a remarkable organization, and I think if you look at how they've ramped that business up globally, and I think if you go to most of the foreign countries, probably all of them are being headed up by South Africans. And so I think Graham Mackay had the vision those days to say that, South Africans don't need to have an inferiority complex about being leaders in big business. And that's why I think they've been successful. They've transplanted that SAB culture into foreign companies, and they've done well from the beginning.
There was one thing that you took from your time at SAB?
Process. Fanatical about process. I mean, you would go into a meeting and present to the leadership of SAB, and they would very soon see whether you'd gone through a process or not. I mean, the question would be, what process have you used? I mean, they are a process-driven business. And I think that's probably one of the things that if you walk around Famous Brands today, and I mean people that have subsequently joined me there from SAB will say, we can sniff a smell of SAB, Kevin, and that's true. Yeah.
What processes did you introduce in Famous Brands, or Steers as it then was? Because it's an interesting story, which we'll get into in a moment. But what processes that you brought across from SAB are still existent?
Probably the single most important one that we've tried to wash across the entire organization at Famous Brands these days has been performance management. I think that in SAB, there was never a place to hide. In that business, if it moved, it got measured. And we've done a lot of that work in Famous Brands in terms of making sure that everyone in our organization is attuned to the macro strategic plan in the business, and that's done by virtue of a performance management mechanism.
Well, let's get into your story now. You were involved after SAB with a couple of guys who started an brand called Keg.
That's right.
And then went back home to East London to go and start your own Keg. So have you literally served behind the bar and made sandwiches?
I have. In fact, my wife and I went back to East London. I'd got to a point in time where I thought I was fed up with the corporate world, and I was going to go back home and own this pub and restaurant and park off at the beach.
How old were you at that stage?
I was probably about 45, I think. Yeah. So yes, I have done that. I've cleaned toilets, I've scrubbed floors, I've washed dishes. I've certainly been behind the counter. Yeah.
How long did you spend doing that?
I spent 18 months there, and it was then that the two chaps who found the business, Robbie Mitchell and Derek Myers, approached me and said, listen, Kevin, this Keg business is out of control. We're just two guys who are really chefs by nature. You're a guy from a corporate background. Why don't you join us as a partner and run this business for us? And we had the time of our lives. There were four of us. Was myself, Rob, Derek, and a financial director. We had offices in Durban, and we grew that business to 67 pubs and restaurants with a footprint even in Australia. So we had a lot of fun.
And then King Co came along. It's well known by JSE investors as a stock that was between 1 and 2 cents for most of its life. How did you get sucked into that?
Rob and Derek had indicated an intention to want to emigrate. They were going to go live in Canada, and they were looking to exit. And it's an ironical story because at the time Alan Amble from Spur was very interested in our business, but from left field came King Co with a chap by the name of Dennis Finch, and Alan's attitude to acquiring businesses was that he would prefer to give a lot more paper, so that people like myself who were staying behind had something to work hard for. Rob and Derek, of course, wanted to get some liquid out of it, so they would prefer cash. And so the reason why we actually ended up in King Co was because King Co had prepared to put cash on the table while Alan was talking about paper.
Didn't take you long to see that was perhaps not headed for the stars.
No, it was a business that we worked out 2-year profit warranties through, and a business really that had some wonderful intellectual property in it, but just really was a business that I think was misdirected.
That certainly isn't the case with the next business that you joined, which is Steers, listed on the stock market a couple of years, 6 years before you went across there. Had done nothing in those 6 years. I guess the family, Halamandris family, thought they needed somebody, almost like your 2 chefs might have done at Keg, and you were the man.
Well, not from the outset. I mean, from the outset, when I met them, they effectively asked me to look after the Steers brand, and I think the reason being for that is that McDonald's had just arrived in South Africa and had literally almost come guns blazing, and I think they were petrified about the impact that McDonald's might have on Steers, being the mother brand, which it still is today. So I spent the best part of 12, 18 months working on the Steers brand, and I think during that time we got to know each other very well, and it wasn't long before they asked me to take on the Chief Operating Officer role, and when we did that, the conversation very quickly turned to, well, what are we going to do to unlock value? I mean, you had this family that had been in South Africa for the best part of 40 years, had worked their bums off, and had a business with a market cap of about 45 million. They were saying to me that, Kevin, this is bizarre because we've got friends who own 2-3 spas who've got more money than we have, and we've been working at this for 40 years. And so, yes, I mean, we got together and said, well, if we're going to unlock some value here, we might have to take some risks. And it was really a question of, if we're going to unlock value, do we take the staircase or do we take the elevator? Bear in mind, though, if we take the elevator, once you push go, there's no stopping. And to their credit, I think that they had a belief in me, and collectively we've done very well. But I often say is that I would never have been able to do it without them kind of in the background all the time. They've been amazing shareholders and fantastic mentors to me personally.
But you had the processes in place before you hit the elevator button.
Yeah, we spent in my early days, even in the Steers brand, which we then washed across the business, were 2 things. It was about process and people. And I learned a very harsh lesson, is that I went into that business and tried to put process in, but the business unfortunately had not been mature enough to absorb those processes because the people weren't mature, the people weren't being developed. And so we stuttered a bit, but once we matched the people and the process together, we've done exceptionally well. And today, Famous Brands have got some magnificent people working for it. Including
the people who were at Keg, which was, is that part of your group now, Keg?
Yes, we've subsequently, about 18 months ago, taken back the Keg business, taken back a business that's certainly not without its challenges. It's problematical. It's shrunk to a network of about 27, 30 pubs now. But the good news is that the category hasn't developed, and so what we are saying, working with the likes of SAB, who have been remarkable to us in terms of giving us insights into that particular part of the market and the consumer, is that we think there's an opportunity for us to reinvent the category again.
I like that in you. There are lots of things as an entrepreneur that is to like in you, but that you kind of go back to. You just mentioned SAB, that you have a history with, Keg, that you helped to co-start. Do you do that with people too? Do you bring people across perhaps who you have worked with in the past?
Yeah, I'm surrounded with some wonderful people. Most of the leadership at some point in time I've worked with before. Probably of the leadership team in Famous Brands, of which there's about 7, I'd probably say 4 of them have worked with me before. Two of them are ex-SAB guys. In fact, it's our HR director. She's a lady. She's ex-SAB. Our supply chain executive is an ex-SAB guy. And the guy who heads up our development team was actually worked for me as a draftsman in KEG many years ago. So, I think there's a lot to be said for networking and keeping in touch with some people that have made an impression on your life in the early times.
The other thing that's interesting is the way that you've dealt with family-controlled business. Sean Summers and Nick Badminton would love to ask you, I'm sure, how you managed to get not only a very successful company, but also a family-controlled company, and to flourish both on the stock market, which again we'll get to in a moment, but personally.
Yeah, I think that, they were smart enough, and I don't mean it in a derogatory sense, to have almost stood back and think that, they were at a point in time where I don't think they had the belief that they could take the business to the next level. And it wasn't simply just a question of, well, here's this smart Alec from corporate, let's see what he can do. I mean, I think it's been a process of, seeing the whites of my eyes in particular, and there's been a remarkable trust built up between the two of us. I mean, today I'm very privileged. I think they almost regard me as part of their family. And so our relationship is one of absolute trust. We trust each other implicitly. And I think that has grown as we've delivered results, obviously. And today the bond is phenomenal between myself and this Greek family.
So it must have come with its challenges as well.
Yeah, it was. I mean, especially in the early days, because when I arrived at Famous Brands, or those days Steers Holdings, I mean, there's a story in itself. I mean, there were a lot of people that they had surrounded themselves with, and a lot of those people we had to move, shift, put in different places of the business. Some of them even say goodbye to. And those people had been with them for a long time. And those when those decisions were had to be made, they would say, Kevin, that's why you're here. And so it was tough. And I mean, just even when we started to ramp the business up, and we'd outgrown the name of Steers Holdings, it was not an easy sell to get them to change the company's name from Steers Holdings to Famous Brands. Still very emotional, very passionate. But I think, those guys believe in hard work and honest endeavor, and I think they saw that in me. And, as we've grown the business, so the bond has just got stronger and stronger.
Market cap from around 45 million, as you said earlier, to 4.6 billion. That's an extraordinary 100-bagger. Not too many of those that you see on the JSE. But you've taken some risks along the road with the acquisition of Wimpy. Today, a huge success story. At the time, I think the market cap what you paid for Wimpy was greater than the market value of the company that you were running.
At the time, our market cap was about 85, 90 million, and we acquired Wimpy at 125 million. Everybody thought we'd lost our marbles and that we would suffocate on acquisition. But it was, in fact, the silver bullet. It was really what transformed the business in its entirety.
How did you know, or did you know inside yourself, that this was going to be the one?
You looked at the equity of the brand, universal appeal, a network with high average turnover per restaurant, a brand that was a strong South African icon, and a brand that at the time was doing very well. I think one of the lads that's with me today is a chap called Darren Heel. He was the managing director of Wimpy at the time. He'd done a phenomenal job in sort of turning a business around that was also going through a tough time at some point in time. And I just thought that, with a guy like Darren and with a brand that had so much equity in it, we could only do better. In fact, I think we surprised ourselves. When we acquired the Wimpy business, I think the network was of order about 285, 300 restaurants, and we've built it to over 500 over time and put a footprint down in the UK. So it was certainly the silver bullet that transformed us, but subsequently we've also surrounded ourselves with other amazing products.
That's been an interesting development from there, because up to that point in time it was almost cookie cutter type of approach, very similar markets that you were serving. And then you went into Tasha's, which we know well here at Melrose Arch downstairs. Of course, Mug and Bean, again head scratching when you did that acquisition. What drove you to believe that those could fit in well into perhaps different types of brands that you had?
When we started our journey at Famous Brands, our very first vision we articulated for that business was to be the leading quick service restaurant franchisor in Africa. And that took us 4 years to achieve. When we done that, by virtue of businesses like Steers, Debonairs, and Fisherways, we said to ourselves, well, and again it's about process, is that how do we re-articulate the landscape so that we don't just get ourselves locked into what was classically called fast foods those days. And we said, well, what we would be about now would not just be quick service restaurants, but also casual dining. And along came Wimpy, and that fitted that definition. And then the next thing we looked at was, well, how do we get a strong presence in the coffee category? Because South Africa was, and still is, going through an explosion in terms of coffee consumption. And I mean, the mug and bean story is interesting. I mean, Ben Malta I'd known all my life almost in terms of being a customer of mine when I was at the Distillers Corporation, because Ben's got a long history in the hospitality industry. I'd made contact with Ben probably 2 years before we did the acquisition, and just kept on being persistent and saying, Ben, I think we should do a transaction. Let's do a transaction. And to my surprise, one day, out of the blue, he phoned me up and said, Kevin, we're ready to do the transaction, and it's you we want to do it with. So that was remarkable. And as we've gone, so we've embroidered on the landscape in terms of how we play. So right now, we've got all those boxes ticked, and 18 months ago or 2 years ago, we said, well, we've got to expand that landscape further, and now it's about leisure. So we're now in the leisure market, but we'll always say it's food service, and we'll always say it's franchising. So there's a good DNA in our business that we put most things to the test to before we just go and acquire them.
You like biographies?
Yeah, I do. I joke sometimes and tell people I have a Boere matric, but let me tell you, I read as much as I can. I have a study at home that's probably the size of this room, and the shelves are filled with business books and biographies, and especially biographies about political leaders, business leaders, sportsmen. I'm fanatical about reading.
Have you read Isaacson's biography on Steve Jobs?
Yes, I've just finished it.
And your take?
Yeah, he's a remarkable man. I mean, a difficult man, but I mean, in fact, we've taken some leaves out of his book more recently. I mean, I think the 3 things that Jobs can teach businesses like ours is about great marketing, great product development, and great design in terms of retail. And if you look at those 3 takeouts, is what we've simply now. About 3 months ago, we've created a division in Famous Brands which they've called themselves the Mad Lab, and the Mad Lab really is responsible now for delivering on those 3 deliverables, and those 3 deliverables are straight out of Steve Jobs' book.
Are they going to keep up with Wacky Wednesday and those kind of innovations?
Yeah, well, they certainly. The team that are together are there to think long term, so they're not talking about what's going to be the next promotion for Steers. But I mean, some of the work we're doing in terms of how do we improve our manufacturing capability. We have a business in Bainsfield in KZN, which is a juice factory, and up to now, all that factory's produced has been 250 ml glass bottles and 5 liter bag in the box pasteurized juice. And I'm saying, that's a business that works on a single shift 5 days a week. We've got to be able to ratchet those assets up. So we've had a very big brainstorm with this Mad Lab team, and we're looking at some exciting other products that we can extract out of that. So it's more long-term stuff than what's the next promotion.
How do you keep yourself enthusiastic and motivated?
Yeah, I love what I do. I get up every morning of my life, and I look forward to going to work. And I'm surrounded with some amazing people and fantastic brands. I mean, I'm in a business which touches the lives of South African consumers every day of our lives. And I think the other thing that's really given me a rev more recently, you spoke about Tasha's. I mean, we've primarily up to now, wherever we've done an acquisition, we wanted to own the brand outright. And then you find an entrepreneur like Natasha Sedaris and her brother Sava Sedaris with 2 little Tasha's restaurants, one in Bedford View is where I live. And I look at the passion and the energy of these 2 kids. I call them kids. They're almost like my own kids. And say, well, what are your dreams for this business? And I say, Kevin, all we want to do is grow. And so we go along and we acquire 51% stake in a little business like Tasha's. We provide the back of our support to these young entrepreneurs, and we unleash them. And I mean, the results of Tasha's in particular has been phenomenal. We opened Hyde Park this morning. It's flying from what I hear, and we're about to open store number 10 in Nickelway, Bryanston. So, and if you speak to the two of them and say, 2 years ago, would you think you'd have 10 tashes? They would have said never. So it's very rewarding for me to be able to find young entrepreneurs like those two people, invest in their business, and just watch them fly. And we've done that with another business called Vovatello, which is also an artisan bakery business founded by a guy that I found in Port Elizabeth who was a surfer and thought he could get into baking and done a good job of it. So, all those sort of things, they keep me busy.
What makes Natasha and Savas and the surfer from PE different to lots of other wannabes?
They have the unbelievable passion for their business. They have so much energy. People say to me with regard to both of those entrepreneurs, so, what is it that you're doing with these people? And I mean, we're doing a lot of stuff if you go and cut through the corporate thing about making sure that their numbers all stack, because they're generally very good in terms of the food side of the business, but not great business people. But what we really do with them, if you take, I often joke about them. I say what we do is we bottle their energy and we sell it. That's what we do. And my goodness, have they got energy.
Mid-50s now, Kevin?
Yep.
You got plenty of energy as well. Are you in the Warren Buffett school? They'll have to take you away from Famous Brands when you keel over, or are you looking to retire at some point?
No, retirement doesn't cross my mind right now. I'm having too much fun, and so as I said earlier, I love what I do. And the marketplace often asks me, is that, Kevin, what are your plans? And my plans really is that I'm very fortunate is that I can say is that I feel like I've been practicing to do this every day of my life. And so I have a great relationship with the shareholders, the family that have 42% equity, and I almost feel like I'm there to safeguard their jewels for now, for that matter. But I'm very mindful of the fact that it's not a family business, it's a public company, and we've got other shareholders to keep happy. If you talk about the subject of happy, I'm just very happy doing what I'm doing right now.
Kevin Hedderwick, Chief Executive of Famous Brands. And Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.